the area of the physiology responsible for the weakness, responsible for holding the karma that causes one to accept or receive the virus, is more the denser levels of the physiology. It's more mental activity, emotional activity, the denser levels. And the point that came up yesterday was that these levels, including etheric body, including physical body, because that's where we hold these imbalances. So I'm just making lots of references back to the source of creation within myself. What is the best path of purification for the four dense levels of the physiology: physical, etheric, mental, and emotional? First impulse arising from being is compassion. Second impulse is something that's a little bit, I'd say, highly discriminating and very one-pointed in its approach to the four dense levels of the physiology. Looks to me, it's so interesting. In the story from yesterday about, Vasuchika, she turned her body from a big, thick body into a body of just a little tiny needle, something like a little tiny needle that's able to penetrate into the physiology of all humanity, into people's hearts. That was the idea, her idea. I see something that looks like that, that's actually being produced as an antidote, that comes up and is able, because it's very pointed, it's able to come up and pluck out, like peel out those little threads of misfunction, of malfunction, which are in the web of the physiology, in the web of the physiology. And when I say that, I mean energetic web, but I also mean some of the systems that are web-like, such as circulatory and particularly nervous system. And strength builds in the solar plexus area. Strength of intention, strength of discrimination is coming from the head area. It's meeting. So that discrimination comes from the head, and the actual power to produce change comes from the solar plexus, and it meets right here in the heart and in the heart region. An energy which is very, I would say, intense. Feels like, and it's not like a big lovey-dovey type of energy, but it's more of a very pointed, very specific, very focused energy. It almost has some elements of, I'd say both elements. I'm seeing elements of fire, water, and air. Water, fire, air, in that level from finer, or let's see, air. Air is at the end. Air, fire, water, like that. Dense, subtle to dense. Now I'm feeling the discordant feelings that specifically draw or attract, like a magnet, attract the energy of the energy signature which is associated or connected to the virus into the body. There's despair. We're clearing despair. Yesterday I kept thinking, oh, we're going to do a healing for the fear, because people are really afraid. But the fear, when it becomes so blown out of proportion that it has to transmute, it becomes anger. And when anger gets so blown out of its proportion that it has to transmute, it becomes depression or despair. So what I'm actually feeling is that. There's also a giving up energy, And that is in a lot of bodies. Now, mind you, all these energies that I'm feeling, they're in the 4 dense levels of the body, including etheric. Sorry, we're not getting so specific with etheric yet. Maybe that'll come later. Clearing the despair, clearing the feeling of giving up, hopelessness. This ties into an important question that came in this morning. A lady was asking about the value of self-sacrifice. And she noticed a lot of that feeling coming up last night, that this is very, very old energy. This is a very, very old pattern or habit that's entrenched in humanity going back so many generations, that something is not going right. Well, quick, let's sacrifice a goat, right? You know, there's always something. There's something you can sacrifice. It's one of the 4 pillars. These are my 4 pillars of Dharma over here. So there's that pillar of tapas, of letting go, sacrifice. And the idea is, what more can I sacrifice? What can I give up? What can I give of myself in order to try to make amends for this problem situation? This is not the approach of energy healing. We are on the verge of such a major transformation, such a huge change as the world has not seen in thousands of years. We are in it. We signed up for this. We are looking at a much more sophisticated way of dealing with the problem. The solution, we go into the field of unmanifest being. The field of unmanifest being provides clear sight. The clear sight shines on the evolutionary transformation requested of us by this problem. And that evolutionary transformation, then we focus our attention, we're focusing our attention intelligently on the value of the evolutionary transformation. And then that transformation dominates, it predominates, and it takes over all the flow that's going on in and around, is swirling around this big situation. All that energy gets directed into the evolutionary transformation itself in a very fine manner. Our united intention in this group, our group healing, is focusing this. The evolutionary transformation is then able to take root and grow and evolve naturally without the sacrifice, without the illness. This also addresses another question that came in. Beautiful, beautiful dear soul. So many beautiful dear souls here. That's the sacrifice question. Here's the question. He has underlying health conditions, immune system issues, trying to do everything to not catch the virus. And the question came up because yesterday we were looking at, well, what is the value that the COVID-19 is bringing? What is that evolutionary value? And we were looking at that, and he said it made it sound as if you almost have to get, it's like he puts in here, kind of like a must-have accessory. You know, it's like the COVID-19 is this tool almost. We're turning the tables on the virus and turning it into a tool for evolution. But the answer here is no, we don't have to get sick. We don't have to get sick in order to stabilize and integrate the evolutionary effect. Kind of like the 100th monkey effect. The principle here is, with our full focus on the evolutionary transformation itself, then we bypass all the slow, arduous, painful steps of getting the sickness and being pulled down by it and so forth. Yeah. I'm just reading through the question. Right. Right. Here in the, so this is a man who's so good with words. here in the webinar, perhaps in the form of an energy healing with our most powerful, in capital letters, collective, which makes contracting the virus redundant from an evolutionary perspective, you betcha. Or through the sun, perhaps. Or perhaps through the sun. Staying indoors keeps us out of the sun to a certain degree. And the sun, of course, is one of the great sources of healing energy in our field, in our world, because sun is Atma, right? Sun is the self. It is that light. That's why we took that moment of silence at the beginning of today's session. That's why we keep referencing back to that silence. I keep closing my eyes. So even more, that silence, that's it. So one of the outcomes of the presence of the virus and so many self-isolating individuals and so much inward stroke is that the quality of the silence thickens. The silence itself becomes, the deepest value of that silence becomes more accessible. We could say, well, the silence of being is eternally silent, so what more of that depth of unmanifestness can one get? It's not that the silence becomes more silent, it's that our ability to experience the total potential of that silence enhances and increases. So this is the first key piece that's surfacing that is a byproduct of this healing, is our potential, our ability to deeply and profoundly, completely experience, to thoroughly experience the depths of that silence. The solution is very much a refinement of the mind. The mind thinks on a more gross thought level, and then it is able to think at finer levels. And when it does that, it also spreads out. This story of Vasuchika, I think I finally remember it without reading the name, sorry guys, was that her body went from being a big, thick, fat body to lots of little pieces body. When I look at the evolution of mind required to comprehend, this is transcending from the level of the mind, right? Because we can transcend from 5 senses, mind, or intellect. The same pattern occurs, like these trees. It starts out as a big, thick, and then it splits apart and becomes many, many small, little. And of course, that's the same, we've talked about this earlier, this is the same shape that our lungs have, and the illness is in the lungs, and it's literally making that part of the body cry so that awareness goes, so that we look very carefully at this particular form of ourself, which is a form of mind. This is a form of mind. When it spreads out into all the little fine points of its own experience, it is able to identify, to fall upon those points and locations in our reality which are anchors to that silence, the silence of being. Just feeling that, that's a combination. Think of, I didn't really think when I put up this picture, I just thought, oh, I like the softness of the colors. That's all I was thinking. But think about the roots of these trees, how they go under the ground, they have the same shape underneath that they have on top, and how it's out at the little fine points of the roots that the nutrients, that the mineralogical intelligence of the earth and the water is able to come into the tree. In that same way, the structures of mind, which go out to their very, very fine, they call it shukshma. I'm pretty sure that's the word. I have it all written down over here. They're Vedic terms for all these things. Sarira is like the big thick form, is like the big trunk form. And then Shukshma is the really, really fine, yes, is the really fine element. And the fine aspect of mind is able to draw up. It's like the roots of the tree. It draws up the silence and it draws it up into the big form. It draws it up into the full form of the mind. So this pattern is being offered back to being as an energy, is like a template for the healing of the mind. And that's really, from my perspective, this is really behind the illness that is being faced on earth right now. So many people stuck at the gross level of their being, and their mind's not comfortable going down to those fine levels where they can draw up the silence of being and draw it into the trunk of the self. There is a light medicine being produced in all of our physiologies, which supports that process. This is the response of the intelligence of our physiologies to the offering of that template to being. We offer the pattern, going out to the little points and the edges, and then drawing up the infinite silence and drawing it up into the trunk. And the response is a light medicine, building in the heart, in the chest area. There's a lady writing in all caps, ooh, is there a way to increase our patience and centeredness to manifest from silence? Clearing attachments. Thank you for the question. We're clearing attachments in mental and etheric bodies, clearing attachments, emotional, mental, etheric, and physical bodies. Clearing attachments. Attachments are like fog. They're like mucus. In fact, physical mucus has a correlation with attachments. And that fog has been clouding up the 4 dense levels of the physiology and obstructing our ability to manifest from silence. I'm offering back to being the intention. The intention is here. How do we clear this fog? It's so thick. We're not just clearing it from our own individual physiologies here, everybody. This webinar is all about a healing which is taking place multidimensionally. So we're doing this for everyone. Cosmic cleanser is a good starting point. Cosmic cleanser is like a solvent. It's very good at clearing the fog. I'm seeing the fog thicker in the subtle levels of the physiology. Definitely the attachments and fear are yoked to, the attachments are yoked to fear, and it's more sitting at the emotional and mental levels of the physiology. So more attachments are deeper in the 4 dense levels than at the grosser levels. This tells me that this is the seed or foundation upon which many people will fall ill coming in the future. So we're going to clear that now. Our collective, focusing on emotional and mental levels of the physiology, offering the intention to dissolve the attachments to being. What do we need to do? The answer coming back is the attachments are they're all associated with different chords. Attachments to something. The attachments connect to something. So this would be the pillar of Dharma that we think of as austerity, right? Letting go. And that has to come along with the pillar of truth. That's our big pillar here, the pillar of truth. Because the principle here is what we're letting go is not a sacrifice or a self-sacrifice or letting go of life, or letting go of comfort. We're letting go of all the attachments that connect everybody. We're talking world family here, everyone, to the structures that bind one to the core, to the big body. We want to start, it has to start to soften and become more liquidy. That's why it's going more from the watery form over to the more air form in that field. And actually, I see all 5 primordial elements involved in this healing. And it's basically what we're doing is we're working through the 5, we're working with the 5 primordial elements in the emotional, mental, etheric, and physical levels of the body. And the clearing is moving through from earth element to water element to, in this order, fire, and then air and space. And it's extracting, the healing is softening up and starting to liquefy and loosen up the attachments as they are embedded in these denser energies or the denser forms of the physiology. Now, remember, the 5 primordial elements can express at a completely physical material level, but they also have their subtler forms. So we're looking also at subtler forms of the 5 elements. Mostly fear is clearing. Fear seems to be connected to the attachments, and people are afraid to let go of things that they're attached to. They're afraid to let go of the familiar. One of the energies that's coming forward from our collective is a kind of inspired enthusiasm or excitement for new forms, for the unknown, for going into the unknown, and for doing things that we're not used to doing, for learning new things. And this is the whole value of human experience, is to move into areas that we've never been before. This is what we do. This is what human intelligence and creativity, what our pure potential, this side is our pure potential over here. What our pure potential is for is to find ways to bring divine expression into the relative. Offering that back to the source of creation. And what's coming forward is that attachments to things in the relative are completely irrelevant. You can keep them, you can let them go, it doesn't matter. That what's really important here are our attachments in deeper levels, attachments to subtler expressions, subtler understanding of self. There's another flow coming out through the heart area. I'm feeling this flow in the heart area. Flow in the heart area is a combination of wisdom and power, right? These two come together and then give rise to this lovely capacity of the heart to understand our experience. That being is experiencing its own nature, period. We take personal responsibility, we take personal ownership, but that personal ownership is only our individual attempt to bring that divine expression and experience, which is constantly going on. That divine dialogue is constantly going on within its own nature, within the field of pure infinite silence, to bring it out into the relative. So any amount of taking ownership or responsibility or claiming it, that's where the attachments are. Aha. So they're lighting up. Thank you, everybody. So these are the attachments. These are the attachments that are clearing. This is not I'm such a bad person because I had these attachments. This is, oh, well, I was doing my best to bring the divine dialogue into the field of my direct relative experience. And I'm doing it by kind of taking ownership. But now the ownership quality, the quality of ownership takes on its eternal form, or its eternal value. Years ago, we were living on the same floor with a mathematician, brilliant guy, brilliant mind. And he had been working directly, he went to Holland, and he was working with the scholars there on the infinite value of each number, that there's, and he came back, he was trying to explain to us, and I'm like, I don't quite get it. But of course, I'm not a mathematician, but the principle was that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the numbers have their value, their relative value, but then they've also got this eternal infinite value. There's like the infinite value of 3, or the infinite value of 7 or 9, or, you know, each number has, it's kind of like the number has its gross value and then its fine value. And we're looking at a similar pattern here with this form of taking responsibility or ownership of experience. That ownership has its individual value, but ownership has its eternal value. And at the level of ownership's eternal value, it's all about the ownership is the process of divine source folding in on its own nature. Through that eternal process, ownership is expressed. It's like part of that process. It's an expression of this. So here we're diving deeply into the silent field of being. And we are appreciating, because we're human. So humans have this ability to appreciate these details. We are the details. See up there, we're all those, the humans are all these, and then the divine is the trunk, right? Is the one wholeness. And then all the little pieces, we're appreciating the nuances of the fold of divine nature into itself, its own self-referral dynamics, and its own internal dialogue. And part of that story is a sense of ownership, a sense of self. So we're really looking at a form of cosmic ego.